Emily, thank you so much for doing this interview today. I'm really excited. I just in the last 4 days, I've gone like I'm halfway into this book, and
Yay.
I was sharing in the bio before adding you in here. I could not put this down. I still can't put this down because it's really helping me and guiding me through a transition, a really big transition that I'm going through right now.
Mm.
That I didn't know that I needed this, right? And the
Hmm.
reason why I love this book and I'm just really grateful that I met you is because you're not like this big influencer to where I'm
Hmm.
kind of getting sick of them a little bit, like the big names.
Yeah.
And I was also sharing before adding you on here that I'm like, with this, because we met in a mastermind, and we can
Hmm.
talk more about that if you want how we met. But I was thinking to myself, and I was talking to my husband, I'm like, I don't know. I think I made a bad business decision. But then I came to the realization, no, it's the network. It's the women I'm meeting within this community. That's my takeaway. That's why I'm here.
Hmm.
So anyway, super excited.
Mm.
Went on a tangent there. But
That's okay. I'm excited to be here. And I just hearing, yeah, that little opener, we could go in a lot of directions, sounds like. But yeah, I'm very grateful that I've met you and to be here and just to have this conversation. So thank you so much for
Oh,
having me.
absolutely. So I read your bio, but I would love to hear from you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background, some of the realizations in between to what you're doing now today and what you're up
Hmm.
to these days?
Yeah, yeah. So, I was a therapist for a really long time. I was a therapist for about 13 years. I worked for a lot of agencies, so really had, boots on the ground, learning a lot, in the mental health therapy world, and started my own practice in, gosh, 2019. So 6.5 years ago now.
Mhm.
And really what I saw was that regardless of what people were coming to therapy for, or whatever the reason, the words that they used, in the first session, really at the heart of it was that they didn't trust themselves. And
Mhm.
so when I started to notice that theme and started to really reflect on the work that we were doing, was like, okay, if we get to the heart of this, that if we can actually build that connection with yourself and build the trust with yourself, all these other goals that you have, or all these other things that you want to achieve and want to work on, all those we reach that. We just reach it in this maybe a little more indirect way. And
Yeah.
so that's really what was the kind of catalyst for starting the model or creating the model was, okay, I'm doing this with all of my clients. It's really the work that I've done personally myself. And so
Mhm.
how can we make it easier on everybody to create something that has some structure and gives people a little bit of a framework? So that's where the self-trust model came from. And then I created a group program, like was not group therapy. It wasn't a typical retreat. It
Yeah.
was this yeah, what felt like this really magical experience that I got to walk through with
Mhm.
women. And that's what really where I started to work with the model more directly and really
Okay.
presenting it as the self-trust model. And then a little over a year ago, well, I guess year and a half ago, made the decision to actually close my practice. And then about a year ago, actually closed down my practice and focusing more on sharing the model in different ways. And that's what led ultimately to writing. And this is
Mhm.
now my second book that I've published. So
Yeah,
it's really
yeah,
the
because
entire model in a book format. So
yeah, and I have to say, like, it's a very easy read. Like,
mhm,
it's hard to put down because even someone with not a therapist background, I've been doing life coaching a lot from my own personal experience and being
mhm.
my life coach helping me change my life within a year working with her. So
Yeah.
I don't have traditional, therapy background and all of that, education and knowledge. But I'm like, this book, it's so like layman's terms. Is that how you say it? Layman's terms?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That was the
very
goal.
well, you nailed it.
Mhm.
You nailed it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I didn't want to write another textbook. I wanted it to be
no,
accessible for people. And, therapy is expensive and therapy
yeah,
is, um, yeah, while I think it can be really powerful and coaching can be really powerful, it also is not accessible for a lot of people. And
right.
so wanting to take all these tools, all these concepts and practices, and provide them in a way for people that are like, hey, I'm a self starter. I can do this. I just need the tools, and I don't want to be, I don't want to read a textbook. And so that's really what this book was meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also curious. Are you still doing Adventure Club?
So it is
Can you tell
shifting. Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about that now?
Yeah, yeah. So Adventure Club, what you're referring to, I talk about it in the book, was the group experience. So it was like
Right.
not quite group therapy, not quite just like a typical wellness retreat. It was, um, I ran it twice, so two iterations of it, but it was over 6 months. And so we met multiple times. The last iteration, we met in three different cities. So we had three different like retreats. In between, we had integration work, and it was just really profound, and like me creating it was this very much this like intuitive hit of like, here, create this thing, and then just taking one step at a time, and yeah, seeing
Yeah.
what unfolded. And yeah, it was really beautiful to see the relationships that still to this day exist. Like that's what's really, really cool is I think the reason I didn't want to do a typical wellness retreat where it's like, hey, let's go to a week-long retreat and have this like deep, cathartic, vulnerable, experience with people.
Hmm.
But then how do you take that home?
Yeah.
How do you keep those relationships? How do you keep those gifts alive? And so Adventure Club was set up so that vulnerability got to be a little bit more titrated. And so
Yeah.
that's why we had multiple retreats. We had time to let that vulnerability come more organically. And so that's what I really see now is, again, why these relationships are still thriving for these women now is because it happened organically and they got to open up over time
Right.
versus feeling this like, oh, we have 1 week, I have to put it all out there and I have to make all these connections. It's like, no, no, we have plenty of time. And
Yeah.
we got to, those relationships got to form at what I talk about in the book is called the speed of trust, which
Hmm.
is much more connected to your nervous system's capacity to trust versus oh, here are these people that I'm supposed to form connections with. Let's do it right away.
Right.
It got to form naturally and organically. So, right now, I'm currently not running Adventure
Mhm.
Club, but I'm actually shifting into a training model format. So, I'm going to be training practitioners who want to use the self trust model in their practices. And I'm actually going to be following a very similar setup to Adventure Club. And so it's going to
Okay.
be small group, in person, in nature, we're really like living by the model, not just learning the model. And
Yeah.
so this new training program is going to model Adventure Club in a lot of ways, but
Okay.
it's going to be specifically for, yeah, practitioners that are wanting to incorporate the model into their work.
Okay. That's beautiful. Yeah. And it's like I was reading about that. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I didn't know that. I think I missed the part to where you were doing this over time, over 6 months, because it does take time to build a friendship,
Yeah.
and to get comfortable with each other. And you want to see if they keep showing up,
Hmm. Hmm.
because like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And it's like, so I think the other thing too is looking at like the parts of you that show up in a group. And so that's
Yeah.
what I would do a lot of one-on-one work with the women as well. And like prepping for each of the retreats is, connecting to how do you typically show up in a group? What part of you shows up in a group? Because
Hmm.
sometimes we have a part that's like, oh, I have this performer who shows up and is
Yep.
like, here, let me impress you. Let me tell you all the great things about me so that you'll like me.
Hmm.
Um,
I'll
or
raise
we
my hand to that. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we'd have a part that's like a people pleasing part. That's like, I'm
Yeah.
just going to go along with whatever the group wants. I'm going to be easy. I'm going to be chill. And so we would really explore those parts and explore like, what would it be like to show up more in yourself
Right.
and, have reverence and gratitude for those parts of you. But also, what would it be like to be like, check in with yourself first? And if the
Right.
group is choosing to do something, actually check in with yourself and be like, do I want to do that? Or maybe I want to go to my room and go by and like journal for an hour by myself instead of doing this group activity. So it was
Hmm.
really encouraged to like check in with yourself and make those decisions from a self place versus maybe showing up on autopilot the way that you have in past groups. And so when you're doing that, like it can be really confronting. And so you're like doing this work, but you're doing it in a group that's also like it's a shared experience. Like all the other women are showing up in that way too, and maybe struggling through that. And so you get to do that. And then you get to go home and live your life for a month or so, and then you
Yeah.
come back together and get to meet again and kind of experience a deeper layer of connection, and then
Right.
go off, live your life, come back again. So it's like, again, layer by layer, building those connections in a way that just feels more authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you are going to be different the second time, the third time that you
Hmm.
show up. Because a lot of times you feel like you're in that interview
Yeah.
process the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
true. I know that I'm different. I just think about it. Like we had a meeting, we have like a babysitting co-op
Mm.
that we're doing in our community to like exchange childcare, like, for free. So we're not paying for babysitters.
Hmm.
And I realized yesterday when we met, I'm like, oh, they're like, yeah, oh, you seem different. You're a bit more like quiet and observant this time. And it's like, well, that's like my true self. Initially, when I
Yeah.
meet, I do, like I said, I do want to impress. I want to show
Hmm.
but it just like happens, right? It's just like,
Yes.
it's like an anxious thing. And I think it's just
Hmm.
an old programming though too. Like I
Yeah.
have
It's
to
protective.
entertain. I got to make sure everyone feels
Mhm.
comfortable. I want them to feel, make sure that they're liked or I see them and it's like it's not my responsibility, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
but those parts are protective. And so we can have,
yeah,
again, gratitude for those parts for protecting us in the way, but then also over time they can slowly um settle a little bit, and they don't have to be at the forefront every
hmm
interaction. And so
hmm
like that's the part that I've really seen just takes time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So I have like some talking points that I wanted to dive
Yeah.
into with this book because again, I just haven't really seen it broken down in this way in other books, or maybe they haven't, I'm not remembering. Um, but why don't we start with the prologue because that was a
Hmm.
good breakdown of just like of the point, right? And of the model you're trying to get across. Like, can
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
peel that back a
Well,
little bit, unpack that?
absolutely. And I will share for your listeners that if you want to listen to the entire prologue, what we're going to be talking about, I did include that as a podcast episode. So I just
Mhm.
recorded the entire prologue and put it up as a podcast episode so you people can listen to the full prologue.
Yep.
But well, I guess, gosh, pulling back the curtain on it, to be really honest, I struggled with the prologue a lot. And
How
I had
come?
it. Well, it started off very differently. It had a different intro for most of the time I was writing it, and it
Mhm.
was just not working. And I knew it wasn't working. And I'm like, but I couldn't figure out what wasn't working about it. And I had sent out some beta, like early editions to beta readers. And I found myself wanting to give the disclaimer of like, but just get past the first couple chapters before you like make any judgments. Cause it's like,
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't proud of how it started. And I think that this beginning of a book is so important, especially a book like this that's 400 and some pages. Like it's a
Commitment.
hefty book. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, for people that we have such limited time spans, there's so much happening, everything's happening really fast. And like you really want to get the connection right away of like, is this
Mhm.
book for me or not?
Right.
Because there are so many books out there, they're not going to be for everybody. And really my intention with this book is I know it's not for everybody, but I want it to find the right women at the right time. And so it's really cool to hear how it found you and like the
Yeah.
timing of when it found you. And that's what I just want it to be really clear up front of like if this book is for me or it's not. And then you just know.
Yeah.
And so that's after struggling with the beginning of it for a while, I finally one morning I woke up. It was like I'm a very early riser. So it was like probably 4:35,
Oh
something
my
like that. And
God.
I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna stop tweaking this book because I tweaked the beginning so many times trying to get it right. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not tweaking it anymore. I'm starting fresh. And I
Mhm.
just sat down, and this was after I'd already finished the book. So I'm like, I know what the book is. I've read it. I've written it, and I've read it so many times. I'm like, just write the prologue again.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I wrote it, just sort of like let it flow through it in that morning. And I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, this is it.
Yeah.
And so it really, so much of this work is relational,
hmm
in my opinion. And we are relational creatures. And so I wanted to start this book in a relational way. And so
Yeah.
it really starts this like, hey, this is a relationship between me and the reader. And like, let's start off with some honesty. And like,
Yeah.
let me just tell you up front what this book is going to be about. Let me tell you the belief that I have that I'm going to spend this 490 pages, trying to explain to you, and then you can decide if it's right for you.
Yeah.
And so that's really why I just wanted to start from that place. And then also encouraging the reader to also be honest with themselves and to take some time to be like, okay, where am I at? Why am I approaching this book? Why am I picking up this book? And so, yeah, that's really how it starts, is this relational piece between me and readers that I may or may not ever meet.
Yeah.
But just wanting to start off that way.
Yeah, I loved it because it was very transparent,
Hmm.
right? Because you can read that and you'd be like, oh, well, maybe I should just return it. Or,
Yeah.
oh, huh, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Um, Another part that I mean, I loved like a lot of parts, but I would have to say in this moment, one of the favorite parts of this book are they your journal entries? Is that what they are?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. When they're written in the other script.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yep.
And I really love I love it and I love reading it because a lot of I like the entrepreneurship part of it.
Hmm.
How you went from pretty much shutting down a successful therapy practice to
Hmm.
starting, I mean, you're not calling it group coaching business anymore, are you?
Hmm.
Or is that
Nope,
what?
that's where I thought I was pivoting, but turns
Yeah,
out it was
the
I
pivots
had
you
some more
went.
pivots to go. Yeah.
Yeah. But it really could be anything. It's like fill in the
Hmm.
blank. If you want to leave law and you want to
Yeah.
get into design, it's complete it's different things.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
love how
It's
you
that
share.
idea that like we by sharing the personal, like people don't have to be a therapist transitioning in the way that I was to
Mm,
hopefully get it. It's being in that liminal space in between of like, I'm
yeah.
ending this thing where I knew my identity. I knew who I was here. I was successful here. I knew my place. And now I'm transitioning into the unknown. And
Yeah.
it's in that in-between space. And what is that like? And what bubbles up from within? What parts get activated when you're in
Um,
that in between? So
yeah. Well, I feel like that resonates with me a lot right now because that's where I'm at.
yeah.
I've had like post baby, my daughter's 2.5. We want to have another child. And I just remember you talked a lot about like hustling, working really hard. That's where, a lot of that was like your programming. Was
Hmm.
that what it was? Is that,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that was my MO. Hard
yeah,
work and hustle, and that's how you do life. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. And that worked really well for me in
Hmm.
my life coaching practice the
Yeah.
first 4 years.
Yeah.
And ever since, having my daughter, and I mean, it makes sense. Like I slowed down, but I just haven't felt the ambition that I once had to um, put myself out there the way that I did, or, market the way that I would, or to talk about the same stuff. And that's where I'm kind of like in the unknown right now. Like I
Hmm.
still want to help people. I still want to help women. I still want to like I had this YouTube channel. I love it, but I don't want to like sell a program at the end of every other
Yeah.
video. I
Yeah.
don't want to say you need me. I can because
Hmm.
you don't. So that's where I'm kind of like in that right now.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's why the journal entries and other parts of it, they're really landing hard with me because I feel like, okay, I'm not in this alone.
Hmm. Yeah. I love hearing that because that's, again, definitely the hope. And I think for me, um, I've learned so much from reading other people's stories and reading memoir. And so that's why I did want to bring some personal story into it. Again, I
Mhm.
didn't want to create a textbook. I didn't want to write a book that's like, hey, I'm an expert on all these things and you should listen to me. It's like, that's not who I am as a person. That's not how I am. It's not how I was as a therapist. And so it's not the book I want to write. And so I
Yeah.
really wanted to bring personal story and be like, yeah, these are things that like I do know. And like, yes, I have knowledge and things. I'm going to share that knowledge with you, but also I'm a human being and I struggle with these things too. And here, let me take you along for the actual ride, not just the on the other side, here's the short, quick fix at the end. It's like, no, 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 let's be in the mud together as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're teaching people how to, trust themselves along the way, right?
Hmm.
And in the journey.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so I have a note here. Meta self-trust. What is that?
Well, actually, you're asking a lot of questions that like get beyond just like the essence and it gets into the actual writing of the book and some of the behind the scenes. So Meta Self Trust was actually the original name of this book, which is
Really?
yeah, haven't shared that. So meta, just like when you think of like metacognitions, like you're thinking about thinking. So it's this expansive layer. So you're doing the thing that you're talking about. And so that's why I originally titled the book Meta Self Trust, because it was not only, again, the teaching of the model and explaining the model in the book format, but it was also me applying the model in real time. And so that's what you get in the journal entries are me in that liminal in between. Okay, I closed down this successful thing where I knew who I was and I don't know what comes next. Why don't I go back to what I know, which is like, I know this model is solid. I know that these practices are powerful. And so let me go back and revisit them and apply them to my life now. Because I've applied this model to other areas of my life, but I'd never applied it so directly to my business. And so I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I know this is solid. Let me apply this medicine to myself. And so I started to go through every practice that's in the book. I went through and did for the, seventh or eighth time in my life and
Hmm.
did them in this order and really in this intentional way of applying it to my business. And so that was kind of this dual storyline of like, yeah, here's the model, but also here's me applying the model in real time and
Yeah.
seeing what that looks like.
Yeah. 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 You had the illustrations are really nice in here too. I really liked the if you could, for people that haven't seen what I've seen, I mean, definitely like get this book, not to be cheesy, but like get the book. Guys, you'll love this. It's super helpful. I like the illustration. I thought it was really not just cute, but like true. Like, yeah, that's yeah. Um Easy and then like the easy button and the expansive button.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you talk a little bit about okay, easy and then expansive? Like what do you mean by that in the
Mm-hmm.
context of what you were sharing in that specific
Yeah.
section?
Yeah. Well, first, I do have to give a shout out to the artist who did the illustrations. Her name is Casey Strobel, and that was such a fun part of this work. I'm usually historically a very lone wolf
Hmm.
person. I do everything on my own, and I'm trying to break some of those protective habits and try to collaborate more, which is
Yeah.
again part of, our connection is kind of being more in community with people. But bringing Casey in to do the illustrations for this book because some of these concepts and ideas, yes, through words, they're helpful, but sometimes just having that image just hits it home so much more.
Yeah.
And I think she just did such an amazing job with the illustrations. And it was such a fun collaborative process with her,
Mhm.
to go through and give her an idea of what I was wanting. And then to see what she came back with, it was just, yeah, it was really great. So if you buy the book just for the illustrations alone, like she did an incredible job. And the
They're
place that
very
you're,
storytelling. I just want to say this. They're very storytelling illustrations. Again, other books I've read, like, self-help books, and I know you're like, I don't want this to be another self-help book. But with like self-help books that I've read, some of the illustrations, they're like charts and they're like matte. And I'm like, "Okay, this is challenging. But
Mhm.
like these ones, I'm like, okay, got it, got it. Like I could read this to my 3-year-old. We're
Mhm.
starting here. Here's our starting point, honey. And here's where we're trying to get to. So which way can we go? Right? Here's what the
Hmm.
journey is going to look like. And that's
Yeah.
how when we're in places of uncertainty or a broken heart or a health thing, like we need that type of um content,
Hmm. Yeah.
illustration.
It's really cool to hear because someone else has also mentioned to me, I think it was actually in with my first book, that she read it to her 4-year old
Mhm.
and would read parts of it. And there was this one lesson in the first book that talked about being a buffalo, which is going towards the storm, going towards the hard thing, even though like we want to run away.
Yeah.
But it talked about the difference between like cows and buffaloes run towards the storm, cows run away. And she was talking about how her daughter after like kind of sharing that story with her later on with she came up to her she's like okay but I have to be the buffalo here and I was just like
Oh,
oh my god yes it's like
wow.
how we
Yeah.
can take these concepts and yeah then share them with specifically our daughters but our children because we
Yeah.
all need this but I just am so moved when I hear moms in particular talking with their daughters around these like getting to learn these skills much
Hmm.
earlier and not having, the connection between us and our intuition severed. It's
Right.
actually reinforced and strengthened through
Hmm.
these, what you're doing with your daughter and what I heard her doing with her daughter. It's just like, yeah, that just makes me so happy to hear
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's less work for them in the future to have to unlearn and to rebuild the connection with their intuition. All the work that we're doing now, maybe they have a leg up in the future.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So expansive
Yep.
and easy button. So yeah,
Yep.
there's an illustration in there that talks about that and just kind of that choice point that we have around choosing the easy path or what we see is the easy path and maybe it's only easy because it's familiar.
Right.
It's what we've known versus choosing the path that our intuition might be leading us towards that might actually look harder, more painful and but it's going to be the more expansive path. It's going to be the path that leads us to a fuller life.
Hmm.
And that's again where I'm talking about from my perspective, knowing the experiences that I've had in life. I'm just no longer capable of pushing that easy button and saying, okay, I
Yep.
want the familiar because that feels safest. I want the expansive life. I want the fullest life possible.
Yeah.
And you don't get a full expansive life that's just joy and pleasure.
Right.
An expansive full life comes with pain and hardship
Right.
as well. But to me, that's worth it to have the expansiveness. And, I talk a lot about like choosing your hard
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
think it's the easy path, but in reality, it's a different kind of hard because choosing to live a life that's true to who you are, in alignment with your values, in alignment with what you want out of your life, that can be really hard. But choosing to live a life that's not in alignment with your values and choosing to live a life because that's what other people want you to live is also hard. It's
Yeah.
just a different kind of hard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because I had done a podcast interview with Cody. You know Cody from the Mastermind, Meyer?
Briefly, yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Um, she had me on as a guest, and I was talking about that even before I picked up this
Mm,
book. And I talked about it and other things. I'm like, and so life is like it's going to be hard, right? But it's like
yeah.
choose your heart. What heart do you want? Heart
Hmm.
of, depression, um, continuing to like betray yourself for other people to like you hard, or the hard that no one gets it, right? Or the hard that is criticized, or to where you're looked at like, you know, a pink elephant. So it's like, which one do you want?
Hmm.
Um, oh, I had another question I wanted to ask you about that, but it left my mind. Uh, oh, it's gone. Maybe it'll come back. Did you have something else that you wanted to say about that?
Hmm. I think just the only thing when I think about those options of, choosing your heart and looking at the paths ahead of you, for me, it's like a soul crushing hard. It's the choosing the path of following what other people expect or want from you
Hmm.
and the path that's going to maybe keep relationships the way they've always been and kind of keep homeostasis. It's like if that's out of alignment with who I am and what I know I want, even if it's a short term, easier path, like that is the kind of hard that just, yeah, just completely erodes your soul. And yeah, that's the kind of crushing hard that I even in the moment know is not worth it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing came back to me, but then there's another thing about that. So the hard, going back to choosing to invest in myself this year, right? Like
Hmm.
just before the year started. The mastermind where I discovered you, it wasn't cheap. It was a $15,000 price tag.
Hmm.
And it was very hard for me to say yes to that. It was very hard for me. But then I knew, like I felt it like, yes, I have to do this. I have to do it.
Hmm.
And then I'm in it and I'm like, well, I'm pissed. Am
Hmm.
I wrong? Should I not have trust in myself?
Hmm.
That, that knowing that, like I felt for sure that this was it.
Hmm.
And as I'm getting deeper into it, and as I processed my disappointment, as I processed my frustration, as I processed my anger with the leader, I was able to move through and break through and then see the the lessons I needed to learn through that after I was able to
Hmm.
process it.
Hmm.
And now I'm able to see the blessings and what I am, getting from it and what I'm learning and taking away. And you had mentioned in this book, um, it was in the spring, summer. Part two, is that the summer season?
Hmm.
I want to
Hmm.
ask you about that too in a minute. But it's like you were talking about intuition and intuitively your intuition, listening to your intuition, it doesn't mean it's calm, it's always going to be right, everything's going to be perfect, it's all going to work out. A lot of times it can be very messy, right?
Hmm.
Is that
Hmm.
kind of what you were explaining in
Hmm.
there? Not kind of, but was it?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
your
Yeah.
like your intuition when you say yes to it and you follow it doesn't mean perfect, everything's great, it's going to be good. No,
Hmm.
a lot of things kind of have to like fall apart or burn down to like
Yeah.
get through it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So just to very briefly respond to the first part around the mastermind,
mhm,
I think sometimes there can be this impulse, and I don't know if this is what is happening with you, but I've seen it in this impulse to like spiritually bypass of like, oh, everything happens for a reason.
yeah,
And so this, huge financial commitment and then disappointment around what actually happened. Well, now I'm learning things about myself. I'm meeting parts of myself
right,
and I'm seeing these gifts. And so we can just be like, ah, great, everything happens for a reason. When I would venture to say, actually, it's only because of the work that you have done that
yeah,
made that worth it. And you didn't actually have to go through that necessarily to get those gifts. And so I think sometimes allowing both to be true, that like who you are and how you met the parts of yourself that came up in there is why you got those gifts. It's not
mhm,
necessarily because you were sold something that didn't match.
mhm,
You received something that you different than what you were sold.
yeah,
And so yeah, like kind of giving yourself the credit
yep,
versus putting it
yep,
somewhere else. And I've shared about my experience a little bit. I haven't shared with you, but I took some time to actually write out my experience because I've also had a very frustrating experience with
mhm,
that, but we can save that for another time.
yeah,
Um, but I think the piece of that I think was really important and why I ended up writing it was because of exactly what you said of like, oh gosh, this was a mistake. Can I not trust myself?
right,
And I think that's the piece that I really, again, why I ended up sharing what I wrote is because we can actually learn to trust ourselves through mistakes. It's
mhm,
not just when I make the right decision, that's when I learn I can trust myself. It's like, no, it's through life and falling down and making quote unquote mistakes that you can still build more trust in yourself. And so that's why I ended up writing again that piece that I can share with you. Um, because yeah, we can also hold people accountable to what because I think this industry in particular, business coaching and things like that, there's a lot of charlatans out there. And
yeah,
so it's also I write in the book about personal responsibility
yep,
and how that can be an empowering thing to take personal responsibility. And also, being a person who always takes personal responsibility for everything can be used against you in
correct,
situations like this, when sometimes it's not your responsibility to
mhm,
take ownership for. Sometimes it's, yeah, seeing kind of where that line is of, I don't
mhm,
actually need to take that on myself. That
yep,
was something that isn't mine to own.
right,
So, anyways, just want to kind of
yeah,
leave that there.
no,
Um,
yeah, I love that, yeah, um, yes, and we can talk more about that later. I
yeah.
also the second part is, and you mentioned it in here, um, I love the part about trusting yourself, keeping your commitments and following through. And then why sometimes breaking a commitment or a promise is you actually, um, you know, staying true to yourself.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, I just want to throw in like a personal story here and,
Yeah.
get your feedback on it too. Because I know that this will lean with my YouTube community. So around boundaries, I just want to talk to you about that for a second.
Yeah. Love this conversation.
Because so real time boundary. I so when you set boundaries with a family member, right? And other family gets upset about it. And you are starting to second guess yourself. Like I set this boundary with a specific family member. I'm like, I need to do this and I'm going to stand by it
Mm-hmm.
because it feels so right to stand by it than to be like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's just who they are. And I'm like, no, because
Mm-hmm.
how I feel when I'm around them, when I talk to them, the topics we talk about, I'm like, this is draining. I don't have the capacity for it, not at this age of my life. And also
Mm-hmm.
just because I just really respect and like myself and love myself a lot more these days than before.
Yeah.
Right? That's been my whole almost 10-year journey. But whenever I feel like, oh, like Nikki, you're being tough, or Nikki, can you lighten up? And I'm just like, no, I cannot. What is your, and let's say, someone who's watching, like, let's say they're like, yeah, same. Like, I'm a villain because I have this boundary, or I
Mm-hmm.
said it, but I can't follow through. I feel pulled because I saw this thing on YouTube or I saw this thing on Instagram to where it's like, life is short, forgive, be kind,
Mm-hmm.
let go. Like, what do you have to say about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And there's
Boundaries piece.
a lot of layers to it because um, so much of it comes back to which part of you is setting the boundary,
Hmm.
who in you is setting the boundary. And because I think as psychology and mental health and therapy has become more normalized and on TikTok videos and trying to like take these intense concepts and put them into, a 10-second little video. Boundaries are this idea of like, okay, boundaries are this one thing. And boundaries now are like good, set boundaries and cut people off or whatever it is.
Hmm.
So, but if you are setting boundaries from a place of this is what I'm supposed to do, or this is what I saw on, TikTok is a good thing to do. If you're not setting your boundary from a true, like connected to yourself
Yep.
place, then it makes sense that following through is going to be really hard.
Hmm.
And so what I'm hearing from you as you're talking about this boundary is not a I'm setting this boundary from a people pleasing or like a this is what I should do part. Like it sounds very much like that's coming from an evolved self place
Yeah.
that like it took a while to get to that place. And now you're very clear
Hmm.
as to what the boundary is and why you're setting it, which is the really important piece. Why are you setting the boundary? And why is
Right.
that boundary important to you? So you setting that boundary from that place of self allows you to actually follow through easier. And again, I'm not going to say
Yep.
it's easy to hold the line on boundaries, but because you're connected to that why, you can do it. You can
Yep.
you can stay true to that. And that's really what I encourage people is like don't set boundaries just because you think it's what you're supposed to do. Like don't set a boundary until you're ready to follow through.
Right.
Because again, it's boundaries are not about controlling other people's behavior. It's what are you going to do if that boundary is crossed? So the boundaries don't require other people to do things. It's you saying, hey, if this happens, this is what I am going to do. And so it actually
Hmm.
requires action on your part. And
Hmm.
until you're ready to take that action, you're actually just going to be eroding trust with yourself because you're going
Yeah.
to set boundaries and then you're not going to follow through. And then
Yeah.
that not following through is what erodes trust with yourself. And so again, yeah, just coming back to encourage you to wait to set boundaries until you're ready to follow through,
Yeah.
until you know why you're setting those boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, and I would also say, like, in me, with this situation particularly, I was really respectful and loving as I was communicating the boundary,
Mm-hmm.
something I didn't really have the skill to do before.
Yeah.
And so I'm really proud of myself for that. And the response, they were like, okay, they're a little shocked and they were kind of trying to get like passive aggressive and sarcastic. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is one of the reasons why I want to, this is another thing. Like, this is what happens or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting to now see the relationship dynamic. Like because we have to see each other, or
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to, but we choose to. It's actually a very civil, mature interactions now.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
feel very just grounded and safe now when I enter the room,
Mm.
whenever they're there.
Yeah.
Something I never felt before.
Wow.
I think I think like when you're coaching and teaching this stuff, you're like, well, it helps you to prepare to do it yourself too,
Oh yeah.
to,
Absolutely.
to take your own medicine. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
just
That's
like
huge
with,
though. And it's like the piece around doing the uncomfortable thing that then allows you in doing the uncomfortable thing is going to change the status quo. So of course
Right.
it makes sense that there's going to be friction or pushback or like people are like, wait, what's happening? We've never interacted this way before. And now you're changing the way we interact. So it
Mhm.
makes sense that it shifts things in the dynamic and people are going to have reactions. And so kind of knowing that going in as well, that like just because there's going to be a reaction doesn't mean that I have to caretake that reaction, doesn't mean I
Right.
have to step back from the boundary. Like, of course, it just makes sense that we do things differently. People are going to respond differently. They're going
Yeah.
to be like, wait, this isn't how we've done this before. So what's happening
Hmm.
here? And so I think what you were talking about earlier around like, what does intuition feel like? Intuition doesn't always feel good. I imagine, and you can tell me like how it was for you when you first made the decision to set the boundary and to change the dynamic in this relationship. It's like it doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always feel
Hmm.
like, oh, yay, this my body feels so calm and settled because
Hmm.
I'm connected to my intuition and doing this right thing. Oftentimes, when we connect to our intuition and it asks us or it propels us to do something different, it it doesn't feel good in our body.
Right.
And our body's like, oh God, no. Like, and it's scary. And like for me, a lot of times it's nauseous. And it's like, oh
Hmm.
God, dang it. Like this, it's true, it's right, but it doesn't feel good.
Right.
And then so it's like working through that and being able to sit with that discomfort to still do the hard but right thing. And then now on this other side, now you have this more ease and more peace and more like the big word you said was safety. You
Yeah.
now have safety entering into relationship with this person or entering into communication with this person, which is huge. And
Yeah.
you wouldn't likely have gotten that safety had you not gone through that discomfort of, oh God, I'm about to do something different, I'm going to change
Yeah.
things up and I'm going to set a boundary and
Sweating,
can I handle
shaking.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like over the phone. It was over the phone. I remember I was really sweaty after. I was kind of shaking a
Mhm.
little bit, but I'm like, if I don't do this, this isn't going to be good for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's like you have to go through it because it was like the boundary needed to be set for a while. And that nudge, come on,
Yeah.
like we have to do
Hmm.
this because whenever like it's just a sign like a red flag when you feel like you see this person text you or their name is popping up when your phone's ringing and you're like, ugh, no, I don't see it. Like that's a sign you might need a
Yeah.
boundary. And you
Yeah.
mentioned it in your book too, but it doesn't mean you have to cut them out
Hmm.
altogether forever. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean that. It
Yeah.
just means that for me in this situation, I can protect my energy and my, just like, yeah, I mean, energy, day-to-day energy, and also my mental energy to where I no longer like this boundary has I no longer have to text or talk to this person on the phone. And that
Hmm.
is liberating because I'm never
Mm.
worried now about this call to where they're expecting me to listen to them vent for whatever, or this
Hmm.
text about I can't make it. So then I get berated because I can't make it to the thing. Like, I don't
Hmm.
have to worry about that ever again. I don't. I haven't for almost a year.
Hmm. Hmm.
But then when I see them, it's good.
Yeah.
We can hang out for an hour or two. There's other people there. I'm not in
Hmm.
conversation with them for that long.
Yeah.
But I feel regulated and again safe now when I'm in the room.
Yeah.
That's one of the
Gosh.
biggest gifts I gave to myself in motherhood.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah,
One of
that
the
is so
biggest.
huge. And again, the words around like actually feeling connected to safety, a sense of safety, and feeling liberated from that because the way even your body responded, like reenacting the phone call, it's like, yeah, your
Yeah.
body knows things. Your body's letting you know, hey, there's something here to look at. And it
Hmm.
doesn't mean, like you said, it doesn't mean it has to be all or nothing. I think that's the part that I struggle with seeing the messages around boundaries now is like, just cut everybody out of your life.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
Sometimes, yes. And that's why I never want to be prescriptive in what I'm doing. And like, I don't know the dynamics of you and this family member. I don't know the dynamics of, the between family members of, people out in just on the internet watching things. It's like, we don't know, but
Right.
people are giving this unsolicited advice of just like cut everybody out. And it's like, maybe sometimes that needs to happen. And maybe it's for a period of time, but not always. And sometimes there is a space to, just explore like what's actually coming up for me and what's true for me again versus what somebody is telling me from the internet that I need to cut off everybody in my family.
Yeah. 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 And then it's like just taking, you mentioned it too, and I'm big on this too, is taking personal responsibility as well
Mhm.
on the role or the part of the equation that you're playing within the relationship dynamic too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it may just need to be like before I voiced the boundary, I was doing actions and I'm like, okay, well, that's not really being received or noticed, or that's not transparent enough. So now I need to bring words to it
Mm-hmm.
in a conversation. And that worked. So you could try other
Yeah.
things before, like, hey, you can't do this, or da 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 da. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
try changing, we can change our behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wanted to ask you, and we'll wrap up here because we're almost at an hour and I want to be respectful of your time. But this book is broken down into 4 seasons. Can you
Mm-hmm.
kind of, are you able to tell us a little bit about the seasons?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So the book is broken down into, like you said, the 4 seasons of the natural world. So it starts in spring, which is really has the energy of planting seeds and setting intentions and really, you know, yeah, identifying what it is that you want to create. And so I think about that even when you're starting to read a book or you're starting a coaching program or anything that's kind of has that new energy. It's like, what do I want from this? So like, what am I bringing to this? And so we really, that's why we open up in the spring. And then we get into summer, which for me, summer represents hard work and really kind of doing the work. We have these longer days, more sunlight. And the fire kind of energy of summer to do this work. And so that's when we get into kind of the meat of some of the work. And then we get into fall where we get to reap some of those rewards for that work and really, look at the gratitude and the harvest and what comes from that. And then we end in the winter and really looking at the gifts that can be in the darkness and in the slowness and more stillness of the winter. And so the reason that it's broken up in that way is the book as a whole, it incorporates what I call these like modern tools. So it includes, more modern therapeutic frameworks and tools that we need for our modern world, while also really trying to bring in ancient wisdom
Yeah.
and bring, things that have been lost along the way, especially when it relates to connecting as women to our intuition and to our bodies. Those relationships have been severed for many reasons. And so it's
Yeah.
like bringing back that ancient wisdom, that ancient culture. And so part of connecting to the seasons and the cyclical nature of our world and us as beings as well is that ancient wisdom. And so I wanted it to not just be kind of a throwaway chapter of like, hey, connect to your seasons and connect to your, the cyclical being that you are. I
Yeah.
really wanted it infused throughout the whole book. And so that's why it's set up in this structure is so you're constantly reminded of yeah, we're not one-dimensional creatures that just like have this 24-hour cycle. As women, we
Right.
have these longer cycles and these different seasons of life, and really how we can honor those seasons and connect to those seasons that can unlock some superpowers in us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is beautiful. And, one part I didn't ask you about was the self-trust compass, because I
Mhm.
really love that piece. Can you speak to that for a couple minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really the heart of the self-trust model is this compass. And it's designed like a compass for a reason because with self-trust, as maybe you've gotten through our conversations, like it's not going to be prescriptive.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, hey, follow these 3 easy steps and you'll have confidence and trust in yourself forever. It's like this is a process and this is a relationship with yourself that you get to build all throughout time. And so it's designed like a compass because you have to go in all 4 directions all throughout life. And just because you've gone north once doesn't mean you never have to go north again. You
Yeah.
have to revisit these directions over and over throughout life. And also, there's not necessarily an order to them. So while I encourage people if they're just starting out and they're like a little bit lost and like, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to start, I do encourage people to start with north just because it's an orienting, like just like with a physical compass and you're out
Hmm.
in the wild and you're lost. Once you find north, then you can at least orient to where everything else is. And so you have a path forward. And so that's why I encourage people to start with north. And so the four compass has the 4 main principles that really help you to cultivate more trust with yourself. And so north is radical honesty. So this is
Hmm.
all about being honest with yourself and this idea that we don't trust people who lie to us. And so if we're
Hmm.
constantly lying to ourselves, even if it's little white lies, or we don't even know that we're lying to ourselves. If we're
Yeah.
lying to ourselves, we're not building trust, we're
Or
eroding
like
trust.
spiritual bypassing all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then east on the compass is keeping promises. So you alluded to this earlier. And so keeping promises is all about that follow through. So again, we trust people who follow through and who we can trust their word. And so we talk a lot about the importance of following through on your commitments that you set to yourself. And I love that you picked up on it in the book because it's an important piece. Sometimes you actually have to break a promise to yourself in order to build trust. And so it's not always as black and white. So we get into some nuance there that, again, if a people pleasing part of you set a commitment, sometimes you actually have to break that commitment to come back into integrity with your values and then
Hmm.
reset commitments from the place of self. And so
Hmm.
again, it's a little bit nuanced there, but again, the idea of following through on your promises.
Yeah.
South on the compass is regulation. So this is all about nervous system regulation. So my experience as a therapist was as a somatic trauma therapist. And so my background is really incorporating the body and the nervous system into the work that we do because it is really, really hard to trust your intuition when your nervous system is dysregulated.
Yeah.
And so we have to start with a baseline of how can I bring more capacity in my system? How do I experience more opportunities for regulation to then be able to discern what is my anxiety, what is my intuition. Because we talked about that earlier of like sometimes intuition feels really shitty. It feels really scary and it feels like you're sweating and your heart's pounding. It's like, well, that's also what anxiety feels like sometimes. And so it's like, how do I know the difference? And so if you are in a constant state of being dysregulated and anxious and hypervigilant and seeing everything as a threat, you're not going to be able to know the difference between what's anxiety and what's your intuition. So that's why having a baseline of regulation is just very, very foundational. So I do walk you through in the book some very basic, sometimes boring foundational ways to
Hmm.
connect your body and have more regulation.
Can you share like maybe one or two now that someone can
Mhm.
practice?
Yeah, yeah. So the 5 areas of regulation that I encourage people to start with are fuel. So how are you fueling your body? Food, water, supplements,
Mhm.
movement. How are you moving your body? Sometimes that also means how are you resting? Sometimes you need less movement, but looking at movement and then looking at sleep. So how much and the quality of the sleep that you're getting,
Mhm.
looking at sunlight, and then also connection. So connection with others and connection with nature. So those are the 5 areas that I encourage people to start with. And again, they're pretty boring. They're pretty basic. They're not the biohacking things, but they are what are going to give you the gift of a solid foundation. And then everything else can build from there. There's a lot of other nervous system practices and meditations and body work and different tools you can do, but not skipping that foundational piece. So that's why I
Right.
encourage people to start there.
And I love that. And I remember reading that part too, because we've been in like biohacking, I don't even know for like a long time, like
Yeah.
years. And I'm like, well, this stuff doesn't last. It's not
Yeah.
sustainable. It's not long term. And it can then go to have you doubting life and yourself and advice from
Yeah.
experienced people, So it's like, what's like the real thing?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there is because it's like, um, okay, I'm doing all these tricks, I'm doing all these hacks, but they're not working or they're not working long term. What's wrong with me?
Right.
Instead of looking at like, maybe there's something wrong with the hacks, maybe the hacks aren't the answer. It's not that there is something broken or wrong with you.
Hmm.
It's that you're trying to skip the foundational part. And we all know, like, if you try to build something on a shaky foundation, it's not going to last.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the final direction on the compass, west, is knowing yourself. And so this is this idea that, we don't inherently trust strangers with the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves. We're not going to trust people that we don't know. And so we have to first get to know ourselves if we want
Hmm.
to trust ourselves. And
Yeah.
so this is really where I start to bring in, there's lots of ways to know yourself. And this is I think in some ways, a more fun one for some people. Some people like enjoy the part of getting to know themselves. I have some like solo date ideas for people to
Yeah.
do. Um, but this is where I really incorporate more of the internal family systems
Yeah.
therapeutic framework or IFS. And this is getting to know all the parts of you, all the multifaceted parts of who you are, even the parts of you that you don't like, even the parts of you that you wish you could hide in like the dark shadows of your psyche and pretend weren't
Uh-huh.
there. So this is really, again, an area about embracing and getting to know all of who you are, all the layers.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all here and you can trust yourself. Sorry, it's a little blurry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful book, and I I just really need it in my life right now. And I'm sure other people are probably like, yeah, same. So,
Yeah, can I put you on the spot a little bit? Because
yeah,
again, I was telling you my intention with this book is, well, now it feels like it's separate from me, like it's not mine anymore
yeah,
necessarily, and it's out there. But as I was writing it, it wasn't like I'm writing this for me. It was like I'm writing this again for the right women at the right time to find it,
yep,
and knowing that and trusting that that was part of part of the reason for this book. And so when you say that it's like hitting you at the right time, I'm just curious if you'd be willing to elaborate and kind of just share how it's impacting you or where it's landing for
yeah.
you right now.
Well, it kind of goes back to, um, this journey, this transition into motherhood. I'm like, I love what I do. I love helping women. But I don't want to do it how I used to do it.
Mm,
And I know that me just kind of like experimenting, doing different things for the past 2 years isn't working. I need help, and invested in this mastermind, not what I thought. And what you speak to in here, it's me coming back to not putting my trust in someone else to give me the answers, but me to come home to me to give me the answers on what the next evolution of how I want to help people transform their lives looks like.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And it's not going to be in a way that I've ever done before, which is hustling hard, really pushing content, really, pitching myself at the end of each video, work with me. Like that feels gross to me now.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, I don't want to be on Instagram. I've never been on TikTok. So when I hear that, I laugh. I'm like, isn't that for like 14-year-olds? But I guess not.
I don't know. I used to have clients all the time that would come into session to be like, "Oh my gosh, here's what I saw on TikTok." And I'm like, "Oh geez. Oh
My
geez."
brain. So if my brain hurts with Instagram, it probably would explode with TikTok.
Yeah, I don't know.
So that's what I mean, like at this
Hmm.
time in my life right now, and there are downloads I'm getting, but it's so contrast to how I've done things. How I used to say how to, do things. Now I'm like kind of contradicting myself with how I'm feeling, what I want to do, but yet it feels so right. So right now I'm in the moment
Hmm.
of I want to slow way down and just kind of like put my health as number one because we're trying to get pregnant again at 41.
Hmm.
And I don't want to be working a ton, having a huge client log like how I did. But I don't know what that's going to look like yet, right? So I'm just
Yeah.
kind of like in a question mark of what my business looks like and how that's going to evolve. And I've been putting pressure on myself because I'm like, I just invested all this money. I got to pop out something. But I'm like,
Hmm.
no, I think right now I'm just in the getting grounded, living by my values, which is my health, hanging out with making time for coffee dates, like not having my phone with my kid. Like I'm
Yeah.
done. I don't want her to see me I mean, we'll do pictures and stuff, but
Yeah.
I now have this, which has felt really weird to not have my phone out at all times. Now I literally put it away for hours and I'll check it maybe three times a day.
Hmm.
Yeah, think about that.
Yeah.
So I now put a screen time thing to track my screen time. I average 44 minutes a day.
That's wow. Hmm.
That's weird, right? Some people be like, "Oh my God, how do you get to A
Hmm.
to B?"
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
that's taking time for me to accept and be like, "That's okay, Nikki. You're not behind.
Hmm.
You're not under a rock. Like this is just what feels good." So it's
Yeah.
stuff like that, and it's being okay with that
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
the unfolding or unveiling or whatever, is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's yeah, it hits a lot of things that resonate with me as well. And that idea of I think you're speaking to like doing things in a way like you're paving your own way. Like you're the way that you're feeling pulled, like the way that your intuition is telling you that you want to do things, you're like, well, I don't see that modeled. I don't see people doing it that way.
right.
I've never done it that way. So like how do I even do it when you're like, I'm used to this way and I see people doing it this way. And I could just go back to like hustle and hard work. Like I know how that feels familiar. And so again, it's that idea of like trail, like blazing your own trail
Yeah.
because your intuition is telling you like that's not going to work anymore. But it's really hard to do that on your own. And so like I just have a lot of compassion and empathy for people that continue to follow the script because it's like, hey, this is the way I feel safe. Often it comes
Right.
down to safety. And so it makes sense to me. And then it's also like once you've gone down that path of blazing your own trail for a while, you realize I can't actually go back
Right.
to the safety of doing it the
Yeah.
way that everybody else tells me to do it. Cause it's like again, for me, it's like soul crushing. And so you're like, I can't go back to being on my phone hustling because it's going to take me away from my child. It's going to take me away from the life that I want to create in this new pregnancy. And like, I'm not willing to sacrifice those things anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think about it these days. Like I had a comment the other day. Well, don't you want to take pictures of her at the park? Like, so you have the memories? I'm like, well, I have memories in here too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right now in this moment, I don't like a friend of mine was like, can you take a picture of, me and, so and so? I'm like, no. Can we
Mhm.
just be here?
Yeah.
Can we just be here?
Yeah.
She was upset.
Yeah.
She was upset. I get
Mhm.
it. She probably felt rejected. It had nothing to really do with me not wanting to take a picture of her and her beautiful child together. It more so had me not betraying myself and the commitment and the promise that I'm making to myself with having
Yeah.
boundaries with this thing that is possessing people.
Yeah. 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 Gosh, I love that so much. And yeah, like that layer of boundaries of like the boundaries with yourself,
Mhm.
not necessarily just boundaries with other people, but like you're like, no, actually, my intention here is to be present. And if I'm constantly taking pictures to have memories, like I'm being pulled out of this moment and I'm not present for it. So I'm not going to have the memories because I'm not going to actually even be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And then having
Yeah.
boundaries with what I'm posting on Instagram. Because everyone's doing
Mhm.
it, right? There are days and I'm like, yeah, well, I want to do it sometimes, but I don't want to do it because I feel like I need to post something because I haven't in a while.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, all that
Yeah.
social media stuff, which is like, if you really think about it deeper, it's like people should they need to like earn to see the inside of your life. We can't just be sharing it. Like, that's
Yeah.
weird, right? I don't think that's
Mm.
safe in many
Mhm.
ways. There's
Mhm.
weird people out there.
Mhm.
So just things I'm thinking about and I'm having to, reach acceptance around and but also being open to, oh no, I want to share this thing, right? And
Yeah.
not and really feeling if that feels good, then to do it, right? And not to
Yeah.
second guess that. So
Uh-huh. Yeah. That's it, like that discernment piece, which again
right.
only comes when you're able to have some access to regulation and connection to your body. Because otherwise it's like, well, people have different, you know, posting something might be right for somebody and wrong for you. So you can't just like follow what other people are doing. But you have
Hmm.
to tune into that, again, that inner compass. And so for you, it's like, yeah, like, oh, this actually does feel good to share, or
Hmm.
this doesn't feel good to share. But again, you don't know that if you're not connected to yourself. So
Yeah.
yeah, building
Yeah.
those discernment skills, I think, are just so powerful.
Yeah.
Um,
They-
can I ask you one more question?
yeah,
Okay.
yes. Thank you for
Um,
asking me questions.
yeah, well, I'm just curious, like, because you're again, this is finding you at a certain moment in time. However, my hunch is like, like you said, you've been doing this for a decade. You've been
Mhm.
doing this work for a
The
decade,
inner
and then
work.
this book is, yeah. And so I'm curious, like, what has been, if you were to pick one or maybe two, like, what's been the most profound or the biggest impact of you trusting yourself? Like, what has been a way that you've learned to trust yourself?
Um, what's coming to mind right now, it's the feeling, right? So when I feel, how can I describe the feeling? Like if I have knots in my stomach or I'm getting a little crampy, it's me betraying myself. I need to cancel that plan. I need to say no and not over explain myself. And the times that I don't do that and I go along to do it because I don't want to upset them or have them be disappointed, I, but then I had the hangover of weeks after of where I felt like I've let my little girl down,
Mm-hmm.
my myself down, right? And
Yeah.
it could be a little thing like having that drink, right? When I'm like, yeah, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
drinking because I'm doing this clean, thing right now. I don't want to drink, whatever for whatever reason, but then I do it. I remember doing that in the past, and I'm like, but it, but now I feel bad because
Yeah.
I made a commitment to myself. We're not doing that during this time frame, and I did it, and I'm like, I felt shitty for a while.
Yeah.
And
Those
it's
like
not
little
that the
moments that
alcohol
chip
made
away.
me feel crappy. It's
Yeah.
me not keeping my word to myself.
hmm Yeah. And it like chips away like little bits at a time, which
Yeah,
is a lot harder to recognize when it's happening versus like sometimes there's those moments where it feels kind of like a big catalyst of like, oh, I lost trust at this moment.
yeah,
But oftentimes it's those moments that chip away.
yeah.
Um,
And
so the
then,
connection to your body, like how, because I would think somebody hearing that of like, oh yeah, you like tune into your body and your body's like giving you these signals and you're learning to listen to that. But that's like leaps and bounds for somebody to get to. Like, how did you get to that point where you were able to know like what your body was communicating to you to even be able to listen to it?
well, I mean, probably just through a lot of trial and error. But if I'm like this, if I'm literally physically like this,
Mm-hmm.
or if I'm like just, like that, that that's not a good feeling. That's very tight.
Mm-hmm.
It's very tight. Another thing with learning how to trust myself, this has been huge in the past. I would say since November, that's when I joined the mastermind. I just stopped listening to a lot of content. I like to read more,
Mm-hmm.
and I've challenged myself not to listen to podcasts on every walk, on every road trip, or on every,
Mm-hmm.
errand. And when I'm ready to take in the content, when I feel like, okay, I'm in tune with myself, my thoughts aren't all jumpy, there's space up here. I just have capacity for something else. I'm not trying to avoid a task or avoid, a conversation. And I just really feel like complete. Then I'll listen to a podcast. Then
Mm-hmm.
I'll watch somebody else's YouTube video. So it's just very quiet lately.
Yeah.
Like if you were
Yeah.
a fly on the wall, you'd be like, this person's very boring.
I love it. That is I think the life that I'm at least drawn to right now is more quiet. But yeah, it's like turning down that external noise because yeah, if you're just always drowning out with external noise, you can't hear what's happening inside.
And
So,
literally with voices.
yeah.
Like with voices. Like I love podcast.
hmm
I love learning things and reading, but it's okay, wait, it's like the phone thing. Now that I don't have my phone, well, what am I going to now?
hmm
So now it's books, but now I'm like, no, let me just be here and eat my meal. And I'm like, oh my God, this has cilantro in it? Really? I didn't know
hmm
I wasn't expecting cilantro to be in this thing. So whatever
hmm
I'm doing it. Not to sound all monk like, but I'm
Yeah.
just being where I'm at. And try to do that too with, a day your kid's not in daycare and you're with them the whole day. Like I have my daughter all day on Fridays. Like
hmm
you'll, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I got to be the toddler all day. But then you'll realize, well, one, it's hard. But two, you'll learn a lot more about their behavior and what their needs are and why they're having the tantrum or why this thing. And then you can respond to it calmly and with compassion if you're not distracted with this or this while
hmm
you're with your child. So it's like
Yeah.
subtle stuff, but like it makes a big difference. Huge.
Yeah. 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 It's the like, it's so simple. What you're saying is like, I just am where I am. I'm doing the thing that I'm doing, but it is so not easy at
Right.
all. So it's a simple but not easy thing. So
Especially
yeah.
nowadays, right? Because
hmm
there's all this stuff, literally, all these things to learn or
hmm
whatever.
hmm
And it's like just because you have access to it doesn't mean you should be doing it.
Yeah.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
Just because it's on sale doesn't mean buy it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I love that. And I'm gonna bring in because I always like filter it through now, like through the model and looking at because I think you're being very honest with yourself about where you're at and what is my capacity right now. So it's a lot of like checking in with yourself and like you're it sounds like very tuned into your body. And again, I would be curious about like the journey to get so tuned in with your body because usually it's not. usually we have a journey to get back to our body,
Yeah.
and that can be unique for everybody, but it's like you're tuned into your body, and then you're being really honest with yourself of like, what do I have capacity for? Why am I turning to my phone right now? Why do I want to turn on a podcast? Am I trying to drown something out? So like you're asking yourself some tough
Yeah.
questions and having to be honest, which is again not an easy thing to do,
Yeah.
but it's profound when you're able to do it.
Yeah. And back to, we'll wrap up here, but back to like the content. But like your book is the book I'm reading right now. And honestly, like I genuinely mean this. It is validating what my my doings and my values since the start of the new year.
Mm.
Not that we all need validation, but sometimes we need validation. We want a
Yeah.
reassurance that we're on the right path.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
wasn't Mel Robbins doing it for me. It wasn't Marie Forleo. I love all them, but at this stage, it wasn't those people doing it for me.
Hmm.
It's this
Yeah.
book because you're not like, I'm the guru, I have all the answers.
Mhm. Yeah,
You're like,
definitely
you can
not.
trust yourself. I'm like, oh, let me
Hmm.
validate that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
anyway, it's beautiful. Yeah, thank you for writing it. And I
Yeah.
think you had said when we were in a master squad call, you've been in the cave for the past year,
Hmm.
writing this book,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and if you want it, ladies, whoever's watching, like it's on Amazon,
Hmm.
right?
Yep, it's on Amazon. It was some other places that I had to pull it off of. So Amazon is the best place to get it, or you
Mhm.
can reach out to me directly, and have some ways to buy direct from me. But Amazon is probably the easiest place right now.
Yeah. And when you're not trying to run or avoid anything, she has a great podcast. When I was, listening to it and when I was binging it, I was like, okay, again, I had and then I stopped because I'm like, okay, wait, like I love this, but I'm gonna give Emily a little break on the podcast. Let me get into the book. Right. So I'm like picking my times, but she has a great podcast as well. I'm excited to hear the guests that you had come on. I
Hmm.
saw when I picked up my phone to check that app because I'm not checking all the apps every single day. There's no need. You
Yeah.
can check a podcast app once a week. I think everything is
Hmm.
gonna be okay.
Hmm.
But I'm excited to listen to that when I get to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, and thank you
Yeah,
so much for just having this conversation and
yeah.
inviting me on. And yeah, I'm just so happy
Thank
that
you.
the book found you, and that you were open to it. That's really,
Yeah,
really special to me to hear. So thank you.
thank you. Thank you for coming on. And I mean, one like last thing, is there any like last piece that's coming up that you just want to say to that woman that's watching right now? And if not, that's fine.
Gosh, no,
I just wanted to check in and
I
ask.
think we covered a lot. And I
I
think I
think
really
so.
appreciate where we landed is it comes back to the simple things. Doesn't mean they're easy, but it comes back to the simple and again, sometimes boring things, but often we know in our gut that that's the right thing for us.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Well, thank you again. Before I forget, I will put links to your podcast and then to how to get your book. I will put it in the description, but I also put in the comment section because I know not everyone is reading the description on these YouTube videos. I don't read them. But yes, that's where you can find, more about Emily and her book and her podcast, and if you want to reach out to her. Emily, thank you again so much. And I'm excited to connect. I think we have another call coming up soon, like our group
Yeah.
call. So I
Yeah.
will see you in that call.
Yeah. And it's so good to get to know you a little bit better. And
Yeah.
now to know the transition place that you're at, I'm excited to see what's ahead for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.